welcome to another episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. My name is Matt Welch, being joined by Devin, Hasson, and David Wolman. It is 11:10 a.m. on a Monday, a sunny, at least, patch of the day in a week that is supposed to be anything but. And yes, we are here to, as we have been for these past couple weeks, talk a little baseball and a little softball as the postseason continues to roll in both those sports. We are, I guess, 2 rounds down in baseball and 3 rounds down in softball. So looking ahead to later on this week for the regional quarterfinal round for baseball and the regional semifinal round for softball. And we've still got a pretty healthy contingent of teams left in our coverage area. We have 9 baseball teams and 4 softball teams. So quick hit a little bit of everybody. Just kind of let y'all know where things stand heading into the latest round of the postseason. We're going to start over in baseball, though, where we have, again, 9 teams still standing within our coverage area and 2 districts in particular that have really kind of shined through the first couple rounds of the postseason. And that is District 6-6A and District 10-5A. 3 teams from each district are still alive in the playoffs. Over in 6-6A, you've got Coppell, you got Marcus, and you got Plano. And then over in 10-5A, you have the Colony, you have Lovejoy, and you have Prosper Rock Hill. So we can talk a little bit about those 2 districts to begin here, David. Obviously looking back to, last week, one of the more anticipated series heading into that second round was Coppell versus Jesuit, 2 teams that are both state-ranked, I believe even as high as are both in the top 10.
Yes.
Whatnot. So, yeah, it's certainly a very high-profile series, a very overqualified second-round series, but one, nevertheless, that had to be played. And a nice little showing for the Coppell Cowboys as they're headed to the regional quarterfinals after a 2-game sweep of the state-ranked Rangers. So, yeah, David, what are just some takeaways from this series as Coppell was able to punch its ticket to the third round?
Well, first of all, you just got to start with their pitching. I mean, obviously, Coppell, was had a big challenge coming into this series against a Jesuit offense that scored 28 runs against Arlington in the by-district round. So you're going to figure, hey, how's their pitching staff stacked up against Jesuit's offense right there? But the Cowboys pitching staff answered the bell, especially in the first game right there. Senior Will Rodman, he just continues to dazzle. 4 straight complete game shutout.
Wow.
He didn't allow a walk. He struck out 5, allowed just 3 hits, and he also got some really good play by his defense as well too. It was a scoreless game early on in the game, and in game 1 Thursday at Jesuit. And one of the Jesuit players, he hits a single to right field, but Andrew Nestor, he guns down a runner by a mile at home plate right there. So, hits Bradley Castillo on target right there, easy tag right there, keeps it scoreless. And then later in the game, Coppell was up 1-0, and then Rodman took a shot off the leg right there, and it redirected to their shortstop, T.J. Pompey, who's committed to Texas Tech, and all Pompey does is throw out the base runner at first base on a really close place. So
right place at the right time.
Exactly. Yep. So Coppell, they have to start the series at Jesuit. They get the win 2-0 right there. Ryan Walker, who's a pretty big factor in this series. He started the scoring with a single in the 3rd inning, and then in game 2, which Coppell rallied to win 7-4. He had 2 really big hits that got Coppell back in this game. It was a game that Coppell actually trailed 3-0, and he hits a 2-run hit, 2-run single in the 2-run single to get them within 3-2, and then later in the game he hits a solo home run. He said it was like the second home run he's ever hit.
Wow!
So he's more of a singles and doubles kind of guy. So that gets it tied up at 3 right there. And one of the most interesting storylines out of this series right there is that Coppell doesn't have its senior likely district MVP in Chayton Krause out there. He's out with an illness, so in to replace him is Andrew Schultz, and all Andrew Schultz does is produce the game-winning hit in that game. He gets a bunt down, and then Coppell scores from third base right there. They go up 4-3. It's part of a 5-run 6th inning right there as they rallied to go up 7-3, and they won that game 7-4. So, huge moments in this series by Coppell, and so that was huge for them to, get the sweep out in in the 2 games right there.
That is now 10 wins in a row for Coppell, so the Cowboys in a really good way. And I was curious, so when I saw, just looking over just the body of work the Jesuit had leading up to this game, so Coppell scored 5 runs in the bottom of the 6th in Game 2 to blow that one open.
Yeah.
That just speaks to the quality of that lineup when they get rolling. Jesuit had not given up 5 runs in a game since March 18th against Richardson Pierce, let alone 5 runs in a single inning. So a nice little feather in the cap for Coppell as they were able to put away the Rangers in just 2 games. Didn't even need to go out to Lake Dallas for that 3rd game.
No.
But so yeah, looking ahead now, obviously you get a matchup between 2 pretty credentialed programs in Prosper and Coppell. Prosper was able to book its spot in the regional quarterfinals after a hard-fought series against Arlington Martin, another state-ranked team. So you got what you'd expect between 2 state-ranked teams, and that was really competitive baseball. All 3 games in this series, yes, it went the distance. All 3 games were decided by 1 run, 1-0, 4-3, and 3-2. And Prosper actually had to work out of a 0-1 series deficit in this one, winning games 2 and 3. Obviously, you look at Game 3, though, some clutch heroics there. They were actually down 2-1 heading into the bottom of the 7th. And there were 2 outs with 2 on base. They were able to score the tying run on an error. And then Jacob Devin is the hero of the day. He comes through with an RBI single to walk it off and win the series. An odd note from this one, the team that had the higher hit total in all 3 games lost. So Prosper, and that includes Prosper losing 1-0 in Game 1. They lost Game 1 despite a 1-hitter from their pitcher, Lucas Davenport. So, yeah, it was just that kind of series. But nevertheless, though, after Prosper kind of had their way with Hebron getting right back into playing some real just tooth-and-nail defensive-minded baseball to advance to the 3rd round. And I don't really have a lean one way or another on Prosper Coppell. Those are 2 great teams, and I would not be shocked if it went the distance once again.
And you mentioned Lake Dallas. That's where we're going to be playing this week.
Yes, that'll be where the series takes place, assuming that's, weather cooperates and whatnot. I would hesitate to give make any series information definitive because who knows how much the weather's going to impact things later in the week. But you also have then on the other half of that bracket 2 teams from District 6A that have advanced to the 3rd round, and that is Marcus, the district champion, team we all expected to be this far. And then this Plano team, which has been one of the more just fun little stories to see a 4-seed kind of catching fire like this. They've had this, there's been this little mojo that they've had working of late. Obviously, you upset a district champion in the 1st round as a 4-seed. That's notable. But, man, some of the spots that they had to work out of in this series against South Grand Prairie in the 2nd round, I'm just going to outline just some of the situations they were up against. So in Game 1 of this series, they were down 3-0 heading into the 7th inning. They gave up 3 runs in the bottom of the 6th. They get down to 2 outs in the top of the 7th. So 1 more out and game is over. They then proceed to score 3 runs in the top of the 7th to send it to extra innings. They wind up winning it in 10 on an RBI single from Troy Piesker. And then in Game 2, they're trailing once again heading into the bottom of the 7th inning. And this time it is a Jason Hawkins 2-run home run to walk it off and win the series. So, yeah, some incredible resolve and mental toughness shown by Plano, a team that, this isn't a team that's got a whole lot of, at least this group does not have much as far as skins on the wall as far as playoff reps go for, I believe, all these kids. This is brand new for all of them. This is a team that graduated, I think, all but 3 or 4 kids from last season's team. The team that, obviously didn't get to even play a full season. So all this is just kind of, just, they don't know any better right now. They're just taking it in stride and just having a fun time with this all. And now they run head on into a team that they've got plenty of familiarity with, obviously. Looking ahead to Plano versus Marcus specifically, Marcus won that series 2-0, but both games weren't just runaways. Game 1 was actually 4-3, and it was a walk-off finish that Hunter Toplansky of Marcus was responsible for the walk-off hit there in a game that Plano actually led 3-1. But then Tyler Schott, the other half of Marcus's star-studded pitching duo, him and Tate Evans. Tyler Schott kind of had his way with Plano in Game 2 through a complete game shutout. So Marcus is obviously the justified favorite in this game. They've won 14 in a row. They're ranked in the state's top 10, and they're in as good a way as they've been in some time. But, man, there's just some intangible qualities about this Plano team right now that, who knows, maybe they make it a little bit closer than it might have looked, if they were playing, a couple months ago and whatnot. But, just a fun little story when you see a 4-seed kind of get hot like this. It was cool a couple years ago when it happened to McKinney Boyd when they were a 3-seed and they were just taking down, state-ranked teams left and right. But yes, Plano onto the third round in their first year under head coach Rick Kramer. Not a bad little debut for Coach Kramer. So yes, we have plenty of representation in District 6A is still alive in the playoffs. And then over in District 10-5A, like we said, you still got Lovejoy and Prosper Rock Hill. Those two teams are going to play head-to-head. And then you've got the Colony taking on Frisco Wakeland. We'll talk a little bit about that series just to give Devin a chance to kind of chime in and talk a little bit of
Hi, Devin.
a little bit of Wakeland. So, kind of sticking with that to deviate from 10-5A and talk the one team from 9-5A that's still standing. I guess it being Wakeland shouldn't be much of a shock given what that program has done throughout the season. But nevertheless, Devin, just kind of outline what you've liked about Wakeland heading up to this point.
You mentioned Wakeland. It doesn't quite have the pedigree that some of the other programs that Wakeland have built over the last decade, but they still have, none of the current group, but, this is their first time to the third round, though, since 2017 when they went to the state tournament. They have good bats up and down the lineup, but it's their pitching that stands out. They played 4 playoff games, and they've allowed a total of 3 runs in those 4 games. That opening series against McKinney North was just 2 pitchers duel. They went there, but they found a way. They won 2-1. They won 3-2. They had their way a little bit with Carrollton Creekview. I think that was kind of expected last week. Yeah. But Robert Fortenberry and Luke Robertson, that 1-2 punch has just been incredible all season long. And then when you get to the later innings, you got to get a guy like Blake Seditol who can come in and shut down, pitch 1 or 2 innings to pick up the save at the end. And they've kind of ridden that formula through their successful district run through 9-5A. And then obviously in the playoffs when pitching just takes on so much of a heightened importance. Obviously, they have another big challenge in the Colony. Really interested to see what happens if they go to a Game 3, because that's when you start getting some creative. A lot of, teams have their 1-2 rotations. Mm-hmm. But the other thing about Frisco is, that Frisco district is that because they have so many games, a lot of times they had to play 3 games in a week. So they were playing Tuesday, Friday, Saturday to play some catch-up. Like some teams had to do due to quarantine. Some teams just had to do because that's the way the schedule was set up. So Wakeland's been there before in terms of having to play 3 games. Now you get a little bit creative in district. So really curious to see if this one goes to a 3rd game, how both teams handle the pitching situation. But yeah, Wakeland seems to be rolling at the right time. 4 straight wins to start the playoffs, and like I say, back in the 3rd round for the first time in 4 years. Kind
of a similar case for the Colony then, David. Just talk about the Cougars and where they're at heading into this pivotal matchup later this week.
Well, it's the first time ever that they advanced to the 3rd round of the playoffs. Yeah. So, district champion versus district champion right here, and just like Wakeland, they pretty much handled their area round series against Woodrow Wilson. They won the first game 8-1 and the second game 10-0 in 5 innings right there. So, it's just like you said, they're talking about pitching right there. The Colonies, got 2 really good starters of its own right there. Obviously, Ryan Scott, who's who also plays center field and is a Dallas Baptist commit. Throws a complete game in Game 1 of this series, and actually adds a 3-round home run as part of that win as well too. And then their ace right there, Devin Reyna, he comes in Game 2, and it's only a 5-inning game just because of the run rule, but he allows just 1 hit, strikes out 3, and he only needed 46 pitches to get through there. So very efficient right there. So he gets backed up by 5 runs in the bottom of the 1st inning right there. So it's pretty easy going from sailing for him from there on for the rest of the game. So it's going to be a fun matchup with these two pitching staffs in this next 3rd round of the playoffs, and obviously the Colony, they've got some hitters as well too. I mentioned Ryan Scott and Kate Irwin, who's their first baseman. He had 5 hits in this series against Woodrow Wilson right there. So and they've also got some other hitters like Christian Matthews and Noah Oliveira, who had a pretty big hit in that series as well too. Obviously Andrew Lovato, their first baseman right there. So it's going to be a really good series. I'm looking forward to it.
And then over in the other half, like I mentioned, you have Lovejoy and Prosper Rock Hill, 2 teams from District 10-5A. Lovejoy coming into this one, their defense has been really hot, just 1.7 runs allowed over the last 7 games. And they had to kind of grind out their spot in the regional quarterfinals. They had to tough out a 2-0 victory over Hillcrest in the last round. And this was the dreaded 1-game playoff, which is, I'm guessing Hillcrest was who lobbied for this, because Hillcrest has quite the arm to rely on in the case of a 1-game series. postseason. This was Kyle Prager, a Texas A&M commit and a potential MLB prospect. And if you're going to rest your season on one kind of pitcher in a one-game series, then that's not a bad place to start. So obviously, yes, that made this one quite close. Lovejoy was able to then scratch across a couple runs in the 6th inning. RBIs from Colby Branch and Aiden Smith to avoid the upset and advance to the 3rd round. And they got a Rock Hill team that they kind of had their way with in the first meeting during the regular season, 8-2. The second game, though, much closer, 2-1 in a game that went 11 innings. Notable thing about that, though, is that Lovejoy threw the same starter in both meetings, Adam Eschler. So Rock Hill has not seen the pitcher who threw on Friday against Hillcrest and has been their game 1 starter for each round of the postseason, that being Brant Corley. So curious to see just how that impacts things, if that maybe gives Lovejoy a bit of an edge heading into that first matchup later this week. But Rock Hill, first time ever as a varsity program, already in the 3rd round of the playoffs. Heck, their softball team's in the 4th round. Let's see, we can look at, before we shift gears to softball, we can kick it back to 6A, talk a little Region 2, because we got Sachse still hanging around there.
I was going to say, don't pass me over and go straight to softball just yet.
No, because I need to catch my breath, because I'm about to talk for a long time after this. So let's see, Devin. So yes, Sachse, they are able to now punch their ticket to the 3rd round, and they've got a credentialed Rockwall Heath program waiting. It was a pretty entertaining series against Belton over the weekend, so just talk a bit about them advancing and how the Mustangs are looking heading into the 3rd round.
Yeah, from 2007 to 2019, Sachse's been in basically a perennial playoff team. They made 11 playoff appearances in 13 seasons, but never made it past the 2nd round. So this was history on Saturday, making it to regional quarterfinals for the first time. And you mentioned the Rockwall Heath team with some teeth on the horizon. Well, they played a state-ranked Belton team that was 25-3-1 coming into the series, and went to Belton on Thursday night and took game 1. They came back and Saturday with a chance to close it out. Belton, got them 2-1. That set the stage for a winner-take-all. And Sachse, dominated. It was 11-2 was the final. Their pitching depth showed. Belton didn't really have that 3rd guy that we kind of talked about or alluded to earlier. Sachse scores in every inning from the 2nd through the 6th. They're not a flashy team. They manufacture runs. They don't have a lot of power. They don't have a lot, but almost every time they got a base runner on, they were trying to bunt to advance the runner. It didn't matter if it was their cleanup hitter, if it didn't matter if it was their number 9 hitter, it didn't matter if the leadoff spot. They're always trying to advance runs, and it put the pressure on Belton a little bit defensively once they got base runners on, and they were able to put together some good rallies. They got a huge start from Jason Scranton, who's been used a lot as a closer this year. In fact, he struck out the side in game 1 on Thursday, but he went 5 strong innings. Ryan Ochoa comes on for the final 2, but like I said, I mentioned the offense. Jet Creel and Davis T at the top of that lineup, and then you just got Jesse Ponce, Harper Howard, Chris Marcellus, Kyle Stanners, Justin Kirby, Alex Rangel. I mentioned all those guys because they all had hits at some point in time during this series. But I think the pitching depth is what really gives Sachse a chance. Carson Sowell started the first game in both series. Justin Mascoro came on in relief, giving good effort. Nathan Darden has pitched game 2 in both. And obviously I mentioned Jason Scranton, but they've played 5 games now in the playoffs, and they've given up a total of 10 runs using 5 different pitchers. So they have some depth. And, Sachse was flying under the radar, but for good reason, because they were 1-6 to start the season. And they had a losing record going into the second half of district play, and then they end up winning 7 straight during the second half of 9-6A. They're the only team to beat Wiley, a Wiley team that's still alive in the playoffs as well. So they turned things around. Obviously won 11 out of 12. They got a good Rockwall Heath team coming up who's been state ranked for much of the year. They had 30 wins overall. They've won 4 straight since a 2-1 loss to Rowlett in their playoff opener. But this Sachse team is not going to back down. They just stared a state ranked opponent in the face and were able to beat them. So they're playing with a lot of confidence. Like I say, I think it's going to be a fun series, and I think it's going to go 3.
So then as we look ahead to softball, first off, if you're tired of hearing my voice, I have some bad news for you because we have 4 softball teams left to talk about, and they all apply to my coverage area. So, Devin, David, please be on standby. Have the smelling salts ready in case I pass out during this. But just going to recap then some of the notes for the softball teams that we still have kicking around, and that is a look at Prosper, who was able to take care of its series against Denton Geyer. Geyer was, Prosper's lost just 2 games, I think, since district began all the way back, a couple months ago. One was to Allen and one was to Geyer. Geyer was able to get the first round, and but since then, Prosper really did kind of control this series, and they once again did so, and actually able to sweep the series, sweep Geyer away in in a very highly anticipated third-round matchup to book its spot in the regional semifinals as Prosper just keeps on rolling. And we're, let's see, and then you have this Flower Mound team that this was the series that was of interest to me mostly last week, and I was able to attend 2 of these 3 games, their series against Allen. This was a very... Game 1, at least, was very, very unique in the sense that it spanned 2 days. There was, of all things, we've seen all sorts of delays and reasons for games getting postponed. There was a light outage at Flower Mound's ballpark that forced play to be halted heading into the 6th inning, and they decided to just pick it up the following day at noon. And this was a game that actually wound up going into extra innings, won by Allen 5-3. Sammy Hood, the hero in this one, with a go-ahead home run in the 8th inning. So you wonder, if you lose game 1, then you got to turn around later that same night and play game 2 if there's any sort of mental hangover from that. No, actually, Flower Mound looks amazing in this one. They won game 2 10-0 and 1 hit Allen. So they, the short-term memory or whatever entry from the sports cliche Rolodex you want to apply there, they were able to roll in game 2 and tie this series up. And then that set the stage for game 3 and another one that requires extra innings. This one, though, goes the way of Flower Mound as they're able to come through with some clutch heroics there in the 8th to win 3-1. The heroes in this one, McKenna Andrews, she had a triple to lead off the 8th inning. She later scores on a Jordan Holland ground out. And then, one of the more, kind of pivotal moments of the entire series was the at-bat from Carson Lee, who hadn't played at all in the series leading up to this moment. She actually hadn't even practiced all week because she was actually out with what head coach Mark Laribas said was a double ear infection. So they just had her used just in a pinch hitting capacity in this in game 3. She was able to give them 2 at bats, and then the latter of the 2, she was able to hit an RBI single to get an insurance run, and they end up winning 3-1. So a cool little story there for Carson Lee, able to come through in a very, very clutch moment to help Flower Mound advance. The things about this Flower Mound team that have really just intrigued me as been following throughout the season was the short game. I have not seen a team yet in our coverage area that is so effective at just bunting you into submission. They are so ruthlessly efficient in the job that they do laying down these bunts. There were bunts in game 1 where they generate no movement on the ball, and it just puts the defense in so many just back-breaking predicaments, and it really hamstrung Allen for a little bit there. There are times, they'll bunt on like 4 or 5 consecutive at-bats if they have to. They're just so effective at it, and that makes up for the fact that they don't have a ton of power. They've got players that can obviously hit it long, like McKenna Andrews, Katie Cantrell, and whatnot. And then also you're seeing in these series that go the distance the benefits of their pitching staff and the ability to basically use 2 pitchers in a sport where oftentimes you see one arm kind of dominate a series. But the fact that they can turn to Landry Harris and Abigail Jennings and really not miss a beat, and especially when you get into these, like in game 2, they'll just rotate between them. They'll have one for a 1 inning. They'll have, they'll start with Harris, and then Jennings comes in and she throws the next 2 or 3. They'll bring Harris back for a couple outs, and they'll put Jennings back in, have her go a couple outs. There's times that they'll legit start the inning with one, go to the other, and then go back to the other one in the same inning. They're just so creative in how they use them, and whether it's, kind of schematically based on what juncture of the lineup you're going up against or certain hitters and whatnot, but you're seeing the kind of winning that battle of attrition and just being able to call upon these 2 just elite arms for just sophomores too. So they got a couple more years of this, and they've it's really been a nice little ace up the sleeve that they've had so far. And it's notable because this series against Allen was the second time this postseason that they've actually been down in a series 0-1. Because remember, they lost game 1 in the opening round against McKinney Boyd as well. And I say that to say this. Their series coming up later this week against South Lake Carroll is the dreaded one-gamer. I'm guessing South Lake Carroll was the one who lobbied for that and whatnot. But so, yes, we'll see how they approach that. If they do just throw the kitchen sink out and just use Harris and Jennings, rotate them as they have been when push comes to shove in these games 2 and 3. But, yes, Flower Mound, they're headed to the 4th round. And then over in 5A, You've got Lovejoy and Rock Hill. So, yeah, we have, both baseball and softball teams that I guess Prosper, Lovejoy and Prosper Rock Hill all still standing. Lovejoy was able to punch its ticket by virtue of a 2-game sweep over Frisco Heritage. This one included an absolute marathon of a Game 2 that went 11 innings, a combined 23 hits between the Lady Leopards and the Lady Coyotes. Heritage started hot. Lovejoy kind of chips away there, and then they eventually tied in the bottom of the 7th on a wild pitch to score Emma Brittlestone. And then the 8th through 11th innings, you just got teams getting out of jam after jam after jam, and then finally Lovejoy is able to break the seal, score that winning run. Skylar Rucker, the hero in this one, she scores a winning run on after Sydney Bardwell was able to put a ball in play. So Lovejoy, they move on to the 4th round, and so does Rock Hill, another team that's like the baseball team. This is their first time going through this as well. First year in the playoffs, and they're now 4 rounds deep. They also were able to defeat a Frisco ISD opponent, sweeping Frisco Memorial by scores of 6-2, 7-1. The big thing here was kind of the quote-unquote big inning was very big for Rock Hill in this. In Game 1, they scored 5 runs in the top of the 5th in a 6-2 victory, and then in Game 2, they scored 6 runs in the bottom of the 6th in a 7-1 victory. And you just kind of look through and just kind of find, like, okay, well, is there any one part of the lineup that kind of dominated this, that really keyed those surges? No, they're pretty balanced all the way across the board. Even, the bottom third of the order, Tristan Lee, Camilla Springs, Emily Alvarez, they hit .333 for the series, 3 RBIs. So, yeah, to get that kind of balance up and down the lineup, obviously very timely at this juncture of the postseason. They've used 2 pitchers. So, again, another team that has that luxury, being able to throw out 2 arms in Taylor Hagan and Grace Burlage. They combined for 19 strikeouts and only 1 earned run. So, Rock Hill in a very good way heading into this series up against Hallsville. Lovejoy plays Sulphur Springs. If they win, hey, we might get an all 10-5A regional final. If that were the case, just noting that those two, Lovejoy and Rock Hill, they split their regular season series. So, yeah, we'll see. But they got to get past the 4th round as well. And then I wanted to close with a note, deviating away from the UIL diamond and looking at the TAPS state tournament in softball, because, guys, we had a state champion crowned in our coverage area. John Paul II got it done. First time in program history, the Lady Cardinals were able to win a state championship. They closed their season on a heck of a run, 25-3-2 overall. They did not lose a game over the final 2 months of the season. So whether that was heading into the postseason, whether all of a sudden, a team that, again, because this was all new to them, this is not a team that had been to the state semifinal round before and whatnot. So after a while there, obviously, though, they were in quite a groove. And, we mentioned David last week talking about the odd note that they had heading into the playoffs, where they played Ursuline in district play and actually played to a scoreless tie, which, again, still trying to wrap my head around how that's exactly allowed in softball and whatnot. But those were the 2 teams that played in the state semifinals, and whether it's just familiarity with that pitcher, because Ursuline threw the same girl that they threw in the scoreless tie, but John Paul was able to get 10 runs on 13 hits in the semifinals, and they cruised to a 10-2 victory to punch their ticket to the state final. And, man, you talk about a pressure-packed situation. So in the finals against San Antonio Antonian, they grabbed the lead in the top of the 7th, and it was Aubrey Hutzler who was able to get an RBI single, and then a hit batter with the bases loaded scores another run. So that puts John Paul up 4-2 on San Antonio Antonian. And then heading to the bottom of the 7th, Antonian responds by loading up the bases with 1 out. And a state championship hanging in the balance. So no pressure, right? No pressure at all. So John Paul, then they turn to their pitcher, Taylor Martian, and she is able to retire the next 2 batters to win a state championship. All tournament selections for Emily Jonty, Aubrey Hutzler, Taylor Martian, and Emma Rodriguez. And John Paul closes the deal in a pretty dramatic fashion to win the TAPS Division I state championship. And really a fitting cap to what's, I think, on record as probably being the best athletics year that John Paul's ever had. This was the 4th team to advance to at least the state semifinal round of the playoffs. Boys basketball, boys soccer, girls soccer also did it. So very fitting that softball is not only able to get that far, but then able to bring it home and close the deal and win a state championship. So congrats to John Paul II on getting it done over the weekend down in Waco, winning a TAPS D1 state championship. And that'll do it, guys. That is all I've got got in the tank. So we will see. Let's see. So yes, that'll wrap up this episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. I hope we're back to talk about games next week. Who knows at this point?
We may this time next week we may still be trying to settle series as they file extensions to try to get games played. Remember, didn't we have a couple of weeks ago that we had a couple series didn't wrap up till Monday?
I think so.
So
it's because for those who have not seen the weather forecast, it is literally supposed to rain every single day this week. Now we'll see, to what extent that holds true. If there are any patches, throughout the week where there's able to be enough room to get games in and whatnot. But yes, any schedule information you see, subject to change is probably the best way to put it, because yes, everything very tentative with the way that the weather is shaping up this week. So we'll see. We'll see where we're at next week though. But until then, folks, you take care. We will talk to y'all later.